Please welcome to the Armstrong and Getty Show, Lanhee Chen, the David and Diane Steffi Fellow in American Public Policy Studies at the Hoover Institution. Lanhee, always great to talk. How are you?
Great to be with you.
So, do we understand that's a new title?
Yeah, I mean, new title, more of the same. This is the thing about academics, right? They all have to have crazy titles that change like every couple of years.
But you're a fellow now and you were something before? Or
well, no,
it's the other part is
in
different?
American Public Policy Studies,
gotcha.
just so you didn't think he was like a fellow in octopus reproduction or something like that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I gotcha. Well, anyway, congratulations.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
For all I know, you're an expert in that as well. So there are so many topics. I mean, we're talking civil liberties and policing and a dozen different things right now. But let's go back a couple of days to the question of mail-in voting, which is such a hot topic.
Yeah.
And Jack and I have been discussing who it might help, who it might hurt. Is it vulnerable to fraud? That seems to be one of those big arguments. What's your take?
In terms of who it helps, I think the answer is it really depends. I mean, I think you've seen certain situations where it's actually helped Republicans. You've seen a number of situations where it's helped Democrats. So I think that part of the discussion to me is a little bit more difficult to nail down. I think the mechanics of mail-in voting are a challenge in some states. So, here in California, for example, we've got a pretty robust mail-in system. If you want to be an absentee voter, you can pretty much ask for an absentee ballot for any reason. Governor Newsom put in place this executive order, which to me is puzzling, that the idea of mailing a ballot to every single registered voters, even ones that have not voted in several cycles, seems problematic when you've got a system already where someone can easily request a mail-in ballot without any problem.
So why do you think he did that?
Well, I think it's part of...
Be as cynical as you want.
I'm sorry?
Be as cynical as you want.
Well, I think he feels in California it's going to advantage people who support him and his agenda.
Okay, there you go.
I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah.
Now as part of it that he wants to make sure as many people have access to the vote as possible. Sure, I suppose that's another reason. But in California, it rings a little bit hollow to me because, as I said, you can easily request a mail-in ballot. You can be a permanent absentee if you want and always get a mail-in ballot. The idea of proactively mailing them out is a little weird to me.
Well,
now, there are other states. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, my words, not yours. He wants to spread out as many ballots to everyone who can fog a mirror and many who can't, that will then be harvested by professional vote harvested, right, so that there can never be a Democrat loss again in the history of California. That I believe that is his intent entirely.
Well, we have this problem in California. It's a known problem of ballot harvesting, people going around gathering ballots which may or may not have been cast, in a legal fashion. It is a problem in California. The other issue we have in California, we don't clean our voter rolls very often. So you end up with this strange situation where one group found that there are actually more registered voters in Los Angeles County than there are citizens. Well, that's a little bit of a problem, and so things like this, it seems to me, need to get cleaned up before you go and start mailing a ballot to every single person who's registered. What I was going to say, guys, is in other states, it's a big problem because you don't have any mail-in infrastructure at all. There are some states where they don't do any mail-in balloting. And so the notion now that you want to go to an entirely all-mail system using coronavirus as the excuse, that to me is completely unworkable. And that is a situation where you're not going to build the right infrastructure and you will have fraud problems. So that to me is an issue to watch out for.
Do you have an ideal way of voting that in your mind, if you were, could snap your fingers and make it happen, would it be all mail-in? Would it be all electronic? Or what would it be? Would it be multiple days that some people have proposed where it's like, there are a 3-day window to vote so people aren't in line? What do you think would be best?
Yeah, I think having a couple of days makes sense. I think having one of those days potentially fall on a weekend wouldn't be the worst thing in the world either. Electronic voting in theory makes a lot of sense to me, but it just seems like we constantly hear about vulnerability to cyber attack, to hacking. Until we can solve that problem with some real confidence, I think that's going to be a tough one. Mail-in balloting, as I said, you've got to build the right infrastructure, right? So you look at Oregon and Washington, are two states, and Utah is another one, that have extensive mail-in voting. In fact, a couple of those states are actually all mail-in vote. It's taken them decades to build the right infrastructure. That means making sure people are opening the ballots in a secure, sterile place, that you've got a way of verifying people's signatures so the vote comes in, you know it's the person who actually submitted the ballot as the person who cast it. Making sure all of those security protocols are in place, that takes time to build. Now, if you can build the right infrastructure and you provide a pathway to go to mail-in balloting, I don't have an issue with mail-in balloting if it's done the right way. But the haphazard kind of putting it all together and saying, hey, let's go to all mail tomorrow, that's idiotic.
Lanhee Chen of the Hoover Institution is on the line. So many directions we could go, Lanhee. What are you thinking about and writing about today?
Well, I do think that I continue to be focused on the reopening question, after coronavirus and what's happening. And I'm getting increasingly frustrated, I got to say, with the conversation about schools and schools reopening. And it seems to me that we need to be making it a priority to do everything we can to get as many schools open and get as many kids back into school as we can do safely by the fall. I have heard various pronouncements. I heard one by a former Homeland Security Secretary saying, well, we can't put kids back in school until we've got a vaccine. That's ludicrous.
No.
That's just, it's not only is it not workable, but what you're doing now with this distance learning thing is you're really disadvantaging a lot of kids who are in the socially disadvantaged or economically disadvantaged category because they don't have access to the technology that middle income and higher income kids do.
Yeah, and that technology is pretty mediocre too, honestly, in terms of learning, as we're all discovering. Yeah, well,
not good. So anyway, we've got to figure out the school reopening thing, because if we don't, we're going to have a huge problem.
There are a number of sociological and religious and historical reasons why the desire for constant safety is at its apex. And, the rampant lawsuits is part of it, too. But someday the book will be written, and I think it will point out that this was the apex of we will do anything to keep ourselves safe, including killing ourselves through economic deprivation and missing out on medical care to avoid, the Chinese bat flu.
Well, you guys raise a good point about avoiding medical care. You've got declines in cancer screenings. You've got declines in people going for basic checkups where they catch things that, if you catch them early, are easily treatable. We've seen significant declines that are going to decimate the healthcare industry. I mean, frankly, you've got, doctors are going to go out of business because of this. So you've got that huge problem. Not to mention the fact that, in some counties, you've really got what I call the rampage of the public health officers. These folks who really, I'm sure they mean well, but they are so delighted to be in a position to finally have their way that you end up with strange decisions.
No kidding.
Here in, we see it here in Santa Clara County, down in the Silicon Valley. I mean, it's a big problem. Even our caseloads, declining, things looking good. I've got to keep it shut down for several more weeks. I mean, this to me just simply does not make any sense.
Boy, and the mental health aspect, speaking of kids and schooling and everything like that, my kids are home, and my son, both my kids, they FaceTimed with their cousins recently, and nobody had anything to say. Everybody was just like, what are you doing? Nothing. And my son FaceTimed with one of his best friends yesterday. I said, how'd it go? And he said, he didn't really have anything to say, and I didn't have anything to say. They have no joy in their lives. That can't be good.
And child mental health experts are shouting that from the mountaintops too, that this is terrible on the kids. And we just, the problem is, and I loved your phrase about the county health officials, running rampant or wild, is they have one priority, and that one priority has now been imposed upon the rest of us, and it's just completely distorting society in a way that's incredibly unhealthy. We will talk about this more in the days to come. Obviously, we're about out of time. Lanhee J. Chen, David and Diane Steffi Fellow in American Public Policy Studies at the Hoover Institution. Lanhee, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
I swear to God, we're going to look back on this period, and for a lot of people, they're going to say, what was going on with us that we all rolled over so quickly and pulled all our kids out of school and shut down all our businesses?
Right.
What was happening in America at that time?
Especially while this disease is unique, it's so comparable to so many diseases that have swept through and done terrible damage, but we didn't commit murder on the economy to avoid it.
And do things that nobody had ever even considered before. And almost as an entire population, we said, okay, sure, yeah.
Armstrong and Getty.